Hey guys, welcome to my beginner's guide into playing and surviving as a crewmate in the video game Dread Hunger. In this video, I'll be explaining the bare bone basics of what you're trying to do, how to survive, and some need to knows I wish I'd been told when I first started. Now, as I said, this is a beginner's guide, so advanced tactics and strategies will be in a different video, but there is still a lot to get through. It's daunting to watch such a long video all at once, waiting for the parts you aren't sure on. So here are the timestamps to easily skip to the topics you'd like to know more on. Now, for anyone watching who hasn't the faintest idea what Dread Hunger is, it's a deception cross survival game that you didn't know you needed. It borrows the best parts of deception games like Among Us and Deceit, whilst fixing the annoying parts of these games where playing the non-imposter role gets stale quickly. It does this by adding a major survival element. You need to actively work to keep your character alive in the game, as you aren't just granted life until you're killed by the imposters. I've played my fair share of Rust, and I see parts of Dread Hunger were clearly inspired by it. You need to work for your life, and you need to build your character up to fight both the Thralls and the other dangers that the Arctic throws at you. Let's set the scene. Dread Hunger is set between 1845 and 1848. You're on an expedition through the Arctic for very important reasons, presumably to chart a course for future trade routes. But when the game begins, the winds have died and your ship is out of fuel. You and your 7 crew need to adventure out into the Arctic, find fuel, which is in the form of coal, and bring it back to the ship to move forward in the game. Your ultimate goal is to escape the Arctic by moving your ship through to the other side. Speaking of the ship, I'll take you on a quick tour to familiarize you all with the layout and show you where the important things are. At the front of the ship is the poker room, with one storage closet inside. On the left is the armory door, which we'll cover later in the video. Behind this sliding door is the kitchen, which has a big stove in it. This is where food is cooked and stored whilst on the ship. There's a crafting bench on the left, and 8 brigs, 4 on either side of this corridor. On the right are 3 beds, which you can use to recover in should you ever be downed whilst on the ship. There are a few storage chests, a second crafting bench, and finally, the ship's boiler. Probably the most important part of the entire ship. You bring any coal you find here, and power it up so that you can move the ship a set distance depending on how much fuel you provide to the boiler. Finally, the captain's quarters is at the back of the ship, up the stairs and above the boiler room. A fuel chute which you can put coal down to fuel the boiler, and the ship's heater which warms the whole ship. The ship's wheel is above the captain's quarters on the top deck, and there's a crow's nest which you can climb up the ladder to for a high point to scout from. As mentioned before, there are 8 players in a game, all with a different role to play. The roles are important, influencing what items you start the game with and what perk your character has. For example, the hunter starts the game with a bow, 4 arrows and 2 bear traps, and their perk allows them to harvest animals and other corpses faster. In contrast, the engineer begins the game with an axe and a coal barrel, while his perk allows him to craft items faster. The more you level your character, the stronger your character bonus is. Your character maxes out at level 30, as will your character's power. The twist Dread Hunger offers is 2 of your 8 crewmates are secretly Thralls, who are magic shaman whose job it is to sabotage the expedition and kill the crew. They can do so in a bunch of different ways, be it through poisoning the food, sabotaging the ship's boiler, blowing up the ship, or just straight up murdering and killing the crew. There are also a bunch of far more subtle ways to undermine the crew and sabotage the mission. And as a crewmate, you need to be on high alert for any player who's damaging the expedition's chance of success. The game has proximity voice chat, so I'd highly recommend setting up and using a microphone when playing. silent players cannot defend themselves verbally, and if suspected of being a thrall, even for the smallest reasons, are more likely to be killed in-game. The proximity chat reaches a pretty decent distance, so calling out to players nearby should work most of the time. For the sake of time, I won't be going into what each and every control to physically play the game is, but all controls are findable in the journal, which you can locate by pressing J. Most controls are also editable in the input section of the game settings. Now, when the game begins, you spawn in playing 5-card draw, a variant of poker, which decides who gets the captain's key. The captain's key opens a special chest in the captain's quarters, which has some starting loot in it to give you an advantage in the game. I have linked the rules of 5-card swap down in the description so that you can learn what card combinations will score the highest to better your chances of earning this early advantage. Once the winner is decided, the game tells you if you are a crewmate or a thrall. Crew will be told, "Beware!" whilst thralls will be told, "Shh" on their screen, and their partner will be highlighted in blue. As mentioned earlier, there are currently 2 different maps, not including the tutorial. These are the Approach and the Summit. I would highly recommend to new players to join or create their own lobbies on the Approach first, to learn and experience playing the game before moving on to the Summit. You'll be matched with players who are more likely to be learning too, and you'll die less to nature on the Approach. It's an easier all-around map, so it's where I would recommend learning the ropes on. After the 5-card draw and thralls know who they are, the game will begin. Typically, all players will run out of the poker room and search the ship madly for loot by opening up chests and storage crates scattered around the ship. All players will spawn into the game with 1 coal in their inventory, so please make sure you put your coal in the boiler before you leave the ship. Experienced crewmates can and will kill players who don't, and whilst I wouldn't kill someone for not doing it myself, I would highly recommend making a habit of it to avoid unnecessary conflict early. Thralls don't like to put their coal in the boiler and help the crew out early, so it makes you look suspicious if you don't. I'll be releasing a full beginner's guide into the imposter class of Dreadhunger, the Thrall, sometime next week. Keep an eye on the channel if you'd like to learn some of the Thrall basics so that you make the most of any Thrall games you're lucky enough to get. Anywho, back to this guide. Now, a game of Dreadhunger has a time limit, and it's in the form of a deadly blizzard, which in default games will hit the crew at the end of the 4th day, also known as Day of Blizzard. This blizzard will kill by freezing any and all players still on the map during the night of the 4th day. But let's focus on some survival basics so that you can stay alive as long as possible and at least be alive to take on the Thralls. So, what difficulties will you face? In the bottom left-hand corner, you have 3 important status meters to keep track of. The big pink one is your health, which shows the amount of health your character has left before being downed and needing to find a bed to recover in. Your health is influenced by any damage you receive throughout the game. Damage could come from other players attacking you, the AI-controlled predators across the map attacking too, or taking damage from a high fall. Your health is also influenced by the other 2 meters, which are very important to monitor carefully. The blue meter is your character's heat. You need to regulate your character's body heat and ensure you don't freeze to death. If your cold meter is ever empty, you will begin losing health. The green meter is hunger, which is, as you'd expect, your character's need for food. All 3 meters are critical to your survival, so I'd like to go in depth into how cold and hunger are measured in the game so that you can understand what's happening, why you might be losing health, and how to fix it. Let's talk about heat first. Your character starts with full warmth when the game begins, and when you venture out into the elements, your character will begin losing heat. seeing as you are in the Arctic. The amount of heat you lose is based off the environment your character is in and the time of day or night. You can gain or lose heat at 3 different rates: 1, 2, or 3. You gain heat at a rate of 1 in a variety of ways, such as being near a secondary heat source like a stove during the night, or in the ship during the day. There are a bunch of ways to gain heat at a rate of 2, but generally speaking, it'll happen when you're near a secondary heat source during the day, or near multiple heat sources during the night. You'll gain heat at a rate of 3 when next to a dedicated heat source, like the smaller heater in the captain's quarters, or standing next to the boiler when it's running on the ship. You are passively losing heat at a rate of 1 during the day and during dawn and dusk, slowly reducing your character's heat over time. As the night progresses to its peak cold, which is the middle of the night, the cold intensity is at a negative rate of 2. Finally, if your character is in a perilously cold environment, such as swimming in the water, your cold intensity will be at a negative rate of 3, which will reduce your health quickly when your heat reaches 0. As of patch 0.9.1, when inside the main explorer's ship, you cannot lose heat in the ship and will gain at a rate of 1 unless the ship is heated or you're on the final day of blizzard. Warming the captain's quarters or turning on the boiler warms the entire ship up and increases your heat gain rate. The closer you are to the heat source, the more heat you'll gain in these scenarios. However, the final day's blizzard will cut through the ship's seeming immunity to cold and you will die quickly, even when next to the warm boiler. You cannot survive the blizzard. The green meter, hunger, is a bit more complicated than cold. It's a much slower killer, but can quickly get out of hand if left unchecked. In simple terms, you begin the match with full hunger. Over the course of the match, your hunger decreases should you not eat food. When your hunger circle runs out, you are starving and your hunger starts influencing your health. Not your current health, but your maximum health. A grey outline will begin eating away at your max health, slowly reducing what your maximum health is. Should this grey outline ever eat away your entire health, so there is nothing but grey outline where your health once was, you starve and die immediately. You aren't downed with a chance to recover, you die. I'd like to quickly note a couple of things which confused me when I first started. Losing health to other sources will reduce your current health, so you could be 3/4 starved and start freezing. You will lose health from your current HP and likely go down in need of recovery upon reaching 0 health. However, your downed state will have the maximum health that hasn't been grayed out by the starvation grey outline. This gives much less time to find a bed and recover. The grey outline cannot be fixed through health restoration items like laudanum, antidote, or even syringes. It can only be removed by eating food, any food, including uncooked meat. Killing a seal and eating its blubber is a quick way to buy yourself valuable time when starving, but cooking up multiple meat or eating stew is the fastest way to recover that lost hunger. Your passive health restoration is based off of your hunger, so you will restore more health quicker if your character is at full hunger and isn't freezing. Eating food will not restore the health you lost to hunger, but it does make it possible to regain health using the health restoration items mentioned before. These 3 meters are one of the biggest put-offs about dread hunger, as new players aren't sure what they mean and end up dying at the hand of nature more times than being betrayed by a thrall. This royally sucks, especially when you're the thrall. So here are a few tips to, at the very least, ensure you aren't killed by nature nearly as often. 1. Regularly check in on all meters and note what you are lacking or quickly losing. Preventing them from getting too low is the key to stopping the panicked runs in the dark trying to find food in the middle of the freezing night. 2. Learn the maps. As mentioned before, there are currently 2 playable multiplayer maps, not including the tutorial map. And learning where the nearest shelter is for when you're away from the ship is critical to your survival. It takes some time, but push your character to their limits. Go different directions and find out what's through that cave you haven't yet explored. If you know what's in that cave, you can make smart decisions to find the nearest shelter if you're ever in a panic and your life hangs in the balance. 3. Make a habit of harvesting at least one wolf a day. Unfortunately, you can't rely on your crew to have made food, and the food that they do make can't be guaranteed as not poisoned. The best way to stay alive is to find a meat source, preferably wolves, kill them, and harvest their meat by clicking on the meat icon, which harvests that meat to the amount available on the animal. Rabbits and seals have 1 harvestable meat. Wolves have 3, and polar bears have 6. There is also human meat, and whilst it can be a lifesaver in a panic, you should avoid eating this meat as crew. Human meat cannibalizes crewmates and makes any non-human food you eat after becoming a cannibal less effective, and you will starve more often. Now, the meat is no good raw, so it can be cooked on a stove or campfire. Simply drag the meat onto the stove, provide a fuel source, and cook. To cook meat on a campfire, drag the meat from your inventory tray and throw the meat physically on the fire. 3 meat should give you about half your hunger back and give you time to explore without passively losing health to hunger. If you can source more untainted meat along the way, then wonderful. Stew is the best food source in the game, requiring 10 food resources to make. Stew can only be made on the stove on the expedition ship. The 10 meats provided don't have to be from the same source, and after it is cooked, there will be 8 stews on the stove to share amongst the crew. Eating 1 stew will fill up half your hunger meter and warm you up, but it's risky as stew can easily be poisoned if left unguarded while it's made. 4. Having an emergency heat source in the form of a campfire can save your life in a bind. Pick up rocks from the ground if you have space in your inventory and ensure you have at least 3 wood. You can then press Q on your keyboard, the default craft button, to craft a campfire out of 4 rocks and 3 wood. This button is editable in settings, so change it to whatever button suits you here. The crafted campfire will provide on-the-spot warmth until the fire goes out, but can only be built off the ship, not on ice, on a stable location. These fires will save you if you plan to go out adventuring for an undefined amount of time, and you aren't sure when you'll be able to get back to a safe shelter. Building 2 campfires next to each other at night is a quick way to regain heat to then keep moving. Cold can take you down very quickly, especially in the dead of night or if you swim through water. Don't go out in the night without a heat source or a planned destination. You will freeze, you will be downed, and you won't be able to make it to a bed to recover, and you'll die. On the topic of death, when you're first killed in Dread Hunger, for whatever reason you respawn in a jail brig on the expedition's main ship. You can talk, but you aren't able to move. Your vision is limited to the immediate inside of your cell and out of the small brig window. On your first death, a map-wide horn will sound from the ship, and you can explain how you died to anyone in earshot of your brig. If the crewmates trust you enough, they can free you with one of the many skeleton keys that are looted around the map. You may find your crewmates didn't bring back keys. This really sucks. And as of patch 0.9.1, you are now stuck doing nothing until you are freed by a player who bothers to go out and find a key for you, or if the game just ends. You can give up and you're now permanently dead and can roam the map in a ghost-like state but cannot communicate with any players. Please try to refrain from doing this and give your team a decent amount of time to free you rather than giving up in an emotional reaction. Skeleton keys can also be used to open locked boxes, which are scattered around the map. They contain a variety of possible loot and are tempting to most players. Saving a few keys to rescue teammates is a highly recommended strategy, but it's easy to fall into the trap of opening every single locked box that you run into with skeleton keys you loot along your journey. The brig system is important, as it prevents Thralls from just shooting everyone they see and the crew not being the wiser to their betrayal. It forces the Thralls to be more discreet about their kills if they want to keep their cover intact. If they out themselves by killing a crewmate, they won't be able to board the ship without a crew announcing their arrival, and they'll be shot on sight by the crew. It's important to note, if you die, go to the brig, are freed, go out again and die again, in any way, you are eliminated from the game and the crew will have no way to know you died as the horn won't play. They will have to locate your actual dead body wherever you were killed. Any and all polar bears on the summit map are known only as Bongo. Bongo is extremely dangerous and should be left alone unless you're prepared for a serious fight. Bongo is relentless, so if you ever accidentally run into Bongo, run towards the ice as he is far slower when swimming after you. It's very common for a new player to aggro Bongo and run to their teammates for help. If you do this, you will still die, but also kill everyone in the immediate area. We love Bongo, but he's terrifying. Let's talk basic strategies for Crewmate. As crew, your priorities should always be the same: coal, food, shelter. You can prioritize other things, like weapons or other loot, but you will appear suspicious to your fellow crewmates, and you risk being killed by your own team if you are sus enough to particularly aggressive players. My advice is to minimize your suspicion when playing crew to prevent a total crew meltdown. But as long as you're aware of the risk, you can't be too upset if your crewmates mistake you for a thrall and kill you should you choose to play in a more suspicious way that doesn't prioritize coal. A quick tip: do yourself a favor when learning the maps. Make mental notes where coal sleds are located. As of patch 0.9.1, coal sleds don't change and will spawn in the same locations every match when playing on the summit. The approach, I have noticed separate spawns for certain coal sleds, but they're generally in the same sort of general vicinity, so it's not too hard to keep track of where those coal sleds are likely to be. Knowing your nearest coal source will improve your win rate as crew significantly and will prevent game after game of running around like a headless chicken hoping to happen upon coal. Now, when you're playing crew, keep an eye on the behavior of your fellow players. Who is ignoring coal? Who's run off without saying a word? Who haven't you seen for a while? These observations can help you build a list of suspects. You can cross off the crewmates who are running coal and being very helpful, and whittle down the list to players who aren't being as useful. When done correctly, you will have a short list of suspects who you can track and watch their movements later in the game. When the game gets into the final days, suspicious behavior is far more likely to get you killed. So if someone on your sus list is still acting strange, call it out, see what the crew think. Working out who the Thralls are is half the fun of Dreadhunger, so talk to players and hear what they've done throughout the game. Now, this demonic creation is one of the Thralls' totems. Totems power the Thralls' magical abilities, and the more they have, the faster they regenerate the ability to use their spells. If you find one of these totems, you know for certain a Thrall has been there to create it. Destroy it as quickly as possible and note who you think placed the totem, or at least who you're sure could not have done so. Try not to aggress on players too early, as it can spell disaster for the crew. I have no shortage of in-game examples of crewmates butchering each other over the smallest of reasons, costing the crew the game. But be ready to fight and kill a Thrall if you stumble on evidence of their guilt and their story doesn't line up. To do this, you'll need weapons. Preferably at least one ranged weapon and ammunition. To get this, you need to spend time crafting. Crafting is a major part of Dreadhunger, and similar to the game Rust, you can craft important items on workbenches. They look like this and are located around the map at many of the shelters, as well as 2 craft benches being located on the main expedition ship. In your first few games, find a workbench and have a look through what items can be crafted and what resources are needed in order to craft those. Pick a few items, go out, locate the resources, and return to a bench to craft them. Learn what each item does and see what uses they have for you in that game. Learning what resources spawn where will greatly increase your efficiency in the game, but that will take time. But here's a quick example to help with some of the more important resources. Coal can be found in these coal sleds. You cannot stack them on their own, but you can store 3 of them in a coal barrel. To make a coal barrel, you need 3 wood and 2 lead ingots. Wood is located around the map, on the ground in short cut-off planks, as well as in wooden sleds and boxes, which you can break and pick up the wood. You can also break the crosses above graves for extra wood. The coal barrel also needs 2 lead ingots. Lead can be found in storage crates, which look like this, as well as storage boxes and ammo crates. Locate 3 wood and 2 lead ingots, head to the crafting bench, and it becomes available to make. Simply click on the icon, and after a short time crafting, it'll be made. You do need to stay in the table while you craft it for this to work. A common ranged weapon is the bow, which requires 2 bones and 1 sinew to craft. Bones are located on skeletons and corpses, whilst sinew is found on skeletons, corpses, wolves, and polar bears. If there's a resource that you're struggling to locate, or an item that you can't seem to craft, please comment below the video so that I can give you some advice into solving any of your dread hunger problems. If the ship is ever damaged, either from hitting an iceberg or if a powder keg goes off, the crew need to locate wood to fix the many leaks in the ship's hull. Hitting an iceberg will spawn 4 leaks around the area that hits the iceberg, typically the front, whilst 1 powder keg will cause up to 10 hulls depending on its position in the ship when it detonates. The ship can only ever have a maximum of 20 leaks, and if left unrepaired for too long, in about 8 minutes and 20 seconds, the ship will sink and the crew will lose the game. If there is even 1 leak in need of repair on the ship, the speed of the ship can travel at is greatly reduced. So make sure you prioritize repairing the ship should it ever take damage. When it comes to crafting ranged weapons, you really only have 2 choices, bow or pistol. But there is a third option that avoids crafting entirely. At the front of the ship, there is a locked door, which requires a 6-digit code to open. This is known as the Ships Armory. Inside are 4 muskets, which do significant damage from long range. The muskets in the armory are incentive to run coal and make stew for the first few days, building up your trust with the rest of the crew. Once you get the ship a good distance, you can open the armory up and earn 1 of the muskets, complete with plenty of ammunition. Muskets are the strongest weapon in the game, but are only available from the armory. Now, as I said, to open the armory, you require a 6-digit code. The codes are located around the map as you are looting, in anything from a storage crate to a wolf carcass. When you drag the code onto your inventory, 2 numbers separated by a little dash will appear on your screen for just a few seconds. These 2 numbers are the position and the number in that position that you will put into the armory. The code doesn't take up an inventory space after the initial drag into your inventory. And should you forget your number, it also appears as a little white number above the correct position on the armory door itself. Each player in the game can find 1 code. Ideally, crewmates who trust each other share their codes. One player will check all the codes are correct by asking each player on the ship for their code. They will then open the armory and distribute the muskets to players that they can trust the most. Do note, a player can only hold 1 gun, be it a musket or a pistol. With 8 players in the game, 2-player codes will be double-ups. These aren't guaranteed to be the Thralls, and with bad RNG, the crew can end up with only 4 of the 6 digits. This is a big time loss, but it can still be opened by a dedicated player who systematically guesses the missing 2 codes. This requires patience and time, and other players tampering or trying to help guess will often stuff up the whole thing, causing chaos on the ship. Opening the armory and claiming muskets late into the game is a common strategy for crew. 4 crew with 4 muskets can quickly kill the polar bears on the summit and do serious damage to any thralls they find. Of course, this does put a lot of eggs in one basket. If the crew focus on coal and get attacked early on by thralls with bows and pistols, the crewmates simply die. If the armory cannot be unlocked either by players not communicating their code or a thrall giving a wrong number early, it can lose the crew a lot of time for 0 muskets. And finally, by opening the armory when the thralls aren't known, you risk thralls getting their hands on muskets. Another deadly result. Now let's talk about the final, most dangerous part of Dread Hunger, the mission to get the Nitroglycerin. When the ship reaches the end of the map, the crew are faced with a giant iceberg. This iceberg needs to be destroyed in order to escape the Arctic. The primary method is to locate the highly explosive nitroglycerin, carefully carry it down to the iceberg, and blow it up. This will destroy the iceberg and make a clear path for the ship to leave through. This mission is the most difficult part of the game for the crew. On the summit, they need to head up the tall mountain on the right-hand side. They need to fight or avoid the deadly polar bears and wolves on the way up. And they need to try and stay warm whilst doing so, as it quickly gets cold up there and there are no shelters nearby. Not to mention, there are of course thralls in the way and summoned cannibals to fight. Quick side note here. This obviously isn't a thrall guide, but you really need to know the basic thrall abilities. This is so you can understand exactly what's happening when they're used in any of your games. The first ability is Cannibals. Cannibals can be summoned on a player by a thrall, which run and attack the targeted player. There is a map-wide sound effect to alert all players that cannibals have been summoned that sounds like this. Do note that no AI-controlled predators, including cannibals, can attack you whilst on board the main expedition ship. The cannibal call will spawn between 4 and 8 cannibals, and the cannibals run faster than crewmates. Keep an eye out for my Dealing with Cannibals guide coming out on this channel in the coming weeks. The second thrall ability is Whiteout. When this ability is used, the entire map will be engulfed in a whiteout, and vision will be significantly impaired. It's easy to get lost in a whiteout when trying to navigate through it, and it's often used to make moving the ship more difficult. There is currently no way for crewmates to see through whiteouts. The final ability is Spirit Walk. Thralls can effectively go invisible and travel extremely fast for a short time, between 15 and 25 seconds. If a player ever vanishes in front of you, it's likely they spirit walked away. This can be confirmed by the animation of a bone dagger being stabbed into the player's wrist shortly before they disappear. The thrall cannot be damaged while spirit walking, but you can see the bone knife floating through the air as of patch 0.9.1. All of these abilities will be used over and over throughout the game, especially when you're on your own or on your way up to Nitro. Once you reach the Nitro, the crew need to dedicate one player to grab the Nitro and carry it down, which removes that player from being able to fight. Keep in mind that the crewmate carrying the Nitro can't afford to drop the Nitro early, as it makes the Nitro vulnerable to be shot and blown up, which can and will kill any living thing close by. The Nitro can only be shot when it isn't being held by a player. Nitro makes or breaks a game, and sticking together with a clear plan can win the crew the game. Thralls will be doing everything in their power to destroy the Nitro, or at least slow the mission down. If a Nitro mission fails, a lot of time is lost for an unprepared crew, and will cost the crew the game. The Nitro mission is the most intense, exciting, and thrilling part of the game, as every player is on edge and looking for the slightest sign of danger. Once the iceberg is successfully destroyed, the ship needs to power back up and move out past the threshold to escape. There's no clear line where this threshold is, it's just keep going until the game tells you that you've escaped. There is a little ship monitor along the top which can tell you about how close you are, but that's all you get. Keep an eye out for Thralls trying to sabotage the boiler and kill players in a final, desperate attempt to destroy the expedition. Simply put, Dreadhunger is the best deception game currently on the market, with the most potential for brilliant moments and genuinely fun non-imposter games. There's great people in the random lobbies, and you just need to weed through the ones you clash with to find reoccurring fun games, without the need for 7 friends who all have the game. The game breaks your heart and challenges you to push your character's body to the very limits to get ahead. It's infuriating, but only because you love it, and makes you hate your friends one game and rejoice with them the next when you clutch a win. I highly recommend picking it up. It's 100% worth the $35 Australian price tag, but it does have a steep learning curve, especially when you play with experienced players who are ruthless and will catch your Thrall ass out for the smallest thing you didn't even know was possible. Don't give up on Dreadhunger when things get rough. I've laughed, I've cried, I've lost my freaking mind in this game, yet I wouldn't change a damn thing. Thanks for watching. Please like if you found this video helpful and consider subscribing for more. Hopefully my guide has given you the basic understanding you need to go out and enjoy playing Dreadhunger. Good luck out in the Arctic, and watch out for Bongo.